Good morning.
Good morning.
And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Lots of people in the Zendo, lots of people online. Really good to see you all. My name is Ted O'Toole, and the title of my talk today is The Generosity of Receiving. It is an act of generosity to allow yourself to be happy. It is an act of generosity to receive love without reservation. Let me explain that. It may not sound right, what I just said. Ordinarily, we equate generosity with giving. I give to you, and therefore I'm generous. That's giving. I receive from you, and that's not generosity, that's something else, that's getting. I've been watching a lot of Pete the Cat lately. It's a TV show. My 4-year-old grandson, Louis, tends to get fixated on one show, and we watch it over and over and over. We went through our Peppa Pig phase, which was a really good phase, and the Bluey phase, which was really good. And now it's Pete the Cat. And Pete the Cat is a cartoon, if you haven't seen it. Pete the Cat's father is voiced by Elvis Costello. And there's a really cool theme song. Pete the Cat, he's one groovy dude. He'll put you in a happy mood. Pete the Cat. And there's this Christmas episode, and we watch it over and over and over. And in the Christmas episode, Grumpy Frog sings about how Christmas is the gettingest time of the year because you get so many presents. And the whole group has a whole lot of adventures, including the whole gang finding the Christmas cat, who, by the way, was under their noses all the time. Pretty zen, right? And the whole group, Sally Squirrel, everybody, ends up singing about how Christmas is the givingest time of the year, which is great, because there's this evolution from getting to giving that has happened. But there's a dichotomy there. Getting and giving are two different things, and you move from one to the other. But before I can get to the point where I talk about how giving and getting are the same, I need to talk first about the conventional view, which is the giving aspect of generosity. And later I'll talk about the getting aspect, or let's call it the receiving aspect so we don't sound like Grumpy Frog. And I'll talk about how receiving is absolutely essential to the Zen path. So giving, I emphasize giving so much, you've probably heard me talk about it, how this is a giving practice. It's a giving practice in the sense that it's about the Bodhisattva spirit of helping all beings to awaken. It's about giving to your Sangha because you can't do it alone. It's about how you're giving something every time you walk through the door because you're supporting other people here. It's about giving moment to moment because with each breath in our meditation, we give our presence. With each moment of mindfulness, we give our presence to the moment. And it's about giving up our very self because we cannot awaken with all beings unless we give up our own ego, our own self-centered point of view. And this is symbolized and embodied when we do bows, when sometimes we do full prostrations, sometimes in front of the Buddha figure. So very often it's the case, as it was with me, that we come to Zen because we need something, we need to get something, maybe we need to have some defect fixed or we want to get enlightenment, but then we go through a lot of stuff and we end up sticking around in order to give something. And the giving nature of our practice is included in the most basic Buddhist teaching of all, which is the Four Noble Truths. Suffering exists. That's the first truth. Suffering is caused by our desire. That's the second. We suffer because we can't accept things as they are. We can't accept impermanence. Now, that doesn't mean that we're passive in the face of injustice, but it means that we accept the reality that injustice exists. And the third noble truth is that we can end our suffering by ending our desire. And ending our desire is about giving up our self-centered worldview, of taking that great leap into a way of being that moves from how can I see the world so as to know how it can help me or benefit me, to what is really here in the world and how can I help the world. So it's the movement from the gettingest to the givingest. And it may not sound right. How can giving up something, make us happy? But the amazing thing, the truly radical view of the Buddha, which is still totally applicable 2,500 years later, is that giving up our needs leads to greater happiness than indulging our needs. There is no end to our needs, and if we don't stop, we'll just keep running on that endless wheel of desire, fulfillment of desire, new desire, fulfillment of desire, new desire. It never ends. And the fourth noble truth is that there is an eightfold path for doing this. And all of the steps on the eightfold path, including right conduct, livelihood, effort, samadhi, can be said to be about giving. And if I were to take a more secular approach to this conventional view that generosity is giving, if I were to approach this from kind of a self-help point of view, it would still make sense. We're unaware of what really makes us happy. We think it's about getting things for ourselves, perhaps even at the expense of others. And a lot of people really believe that you can become happy by taking things from other people. It just isn't true. And studies have shown that once basic needs are met, the person with more money or more possessions is not happier than the person with less money or less possessions. Lottery winners often encounter disaster. And it's incredible how this wrong view that money can buy happiness, that I can be happy by getting more stuff, is so pervasive in our society. So there's another TV show I've been watching. I had a little break. And this one for adults, and it's called Alone. Maybe you've seen it. It's a reality show. It's from the History Channel. And I think it's pretty good for a reality show. I don't feel manipulated by it. It seems genuine, although I don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but it's about survival skills. They drop off 10 people in a very remote location like Vancouver Island or Labrador or Patagonia, and they have to survive absolutely alone with just a few basic supplies. And they film themselves, so they really are alone. There's no camera crew there. And what usually gets them, I think the longest anyone has lasted is 100 days. What usually gets them is they just can't get enough food. They can never find enough to keep it up. Now, it's a little weird watching people starve themselves for our entertainment. The winner gets $500,000. I'm not sure about the ethics of this, but I really like to watch it, because I've always been drawn to the kind of adventure where people are in extreme situations and they have to reach really deep and sort of find out what they're made of and find out what their limits are. Because that, I think, can be a place of real spiritual transformation. And people do this all the time, consciously or unconsciously, subject themselves to really extreme conditions because there's something. I think it's an aspiration for spirituality often. But so some people drop out fairly quickly for various reasons, but among the people who make it really long term, there seems to be a pattern. Not everybody fits it, but most of them seem to get to the point where all of the reasons that brought them there kind of drop away. Some people go in with this really strong ego structure that says, I can do anything, I am very strong, I will prevail no matter what. And they can never sustain that. They always get beaten. And for most of them, winning the money is a big motivator, and they have big dreams for the money, and it's almost always involving a better life for their family. They tend to have, I think, very generous motivations, but even that falls away. And they end up asking, why am I here? Why am I here? And what comes in? And almost invariably, it is a deep love for the people that they are close to, and everything else falls away. And they realize that's where I need to be. I need to be at home. Maybe getting the money was tied up with my ego. Maybe that's not the best way to help my family. Maybe my family would just rather have me home. And, you know, just as an aside, I want to point out, you don't have to go to Northern Canada or live alone among grizzly bears to find all of this out. You can sit on your cushion, and if you sit there long enough, the same thing is going to happen. It's less dramatic. There will probably never be a Zen reality show because it would be really boring, but it's the same thing. It's that going to that place of spiritual transformation by really challenging yourself. That's why Rohatsu is so hard. So anyway, giving leads to happiness. Taking, which could be maybe symbolized by conquering nature, does not. Giving into nature, getting into the rhythm of the place, approaching it with great humility, that works. And the giving nature of our practice is there in the ritual all of the time. Sundays are pretty informal, but if you show up for some of our morning services, you'll see some formality. You'll see bowing. You'll see bowing to the Buddhas and ancestors, bowing to each other, bowing when we enter the room on formal occasions. There's everything we do at the altar. We make offerings. We offer flowers. We offer lavender buds. And it's there in our service to the community. On Sundays, we have many people kind of behind the scenes making all this possible. We have our tea cook and our greeter and our attendant and our tech person and our intro teacher and others that I'm probably leaving out here, our Dolan. And contributing financially, which is something we can do without any embarrassment or hangups. It's good to give to the community. So all kinds of forms of giving. But now, what about receiving? If I had to select two teachings that were absolutely essential for understanding Zen, I think I would choose the Four Noble Truths, which is about giving. And I would also choose the emptiness teachings of Mahayana Buddhism, which completes that picture. The Four Noble Truths are focused somewhat on individual transformation, but the emptiness teachings are about interdependence, which is a teaching that naturally leads to an understanding that giving and receiving are the same. And the emptiness teachings, which arose with Mahayana Buddhism about maybe 500 years after the time of the Buddha, is something that the Zen tradition is part of. Everything is empty, but emptiness does not mean nothingness. Emptiness means that things are empty of an individual existence. But everything is also connected to a great web that we can call thusness or suchness. So emptiness is also fullness, as Thich Nhat Hanh has said. So my own individuality is illusory in a sense, but being, suchness, thusness of everything that makes up the universe is something I'm a part of, and I'm essential to it, and I will return to it. And this kind of teaching can be a great comfort when we're considering the impermanence of life. It's impermanent in one sense, but not in another. But the point is, here's the point. If everything is interrelated and I'm included in everything, then I can't possibly be separate from everything else. And there is no duality, and there is no giver separate from the recipient. If I give to others, I, by definition, give to myself. If I receive, I, by definition, receive with others on behalf of others. And there's no possible way that I can set myself apart from others and say, I don't deserve something, that I don't deserve to be part of this suchness, that I'm somehow apart from it and different standards apply to me than apply to everyone else. That maybe I don't deserve love and happiness. There is no way that I can say that I'm setting myself apart and I'm benefiting others by somehow hurting myself. I cannot benefit others by hurting myself. And I could say this all day. I mean, you could take it in instantly, intellectually, but I cannot benefit others by hurting myself. How to take that in deeply, that's a whole nother thing. And it takes a whole nother level of work. And I think this is a good time of year to talk about this because it's time for New Year's resolutions, time for everyone to make vows. And maybe you've already made some vows, maybe you've already broken them, we're 5 days in. But how about adding another one, which is, I vow to properly take my place in the universe by accepting happiness along with all beings. How about that vow? And I have 3 guidelines about how we can do this. Number 1, this is a bit of a caveat. It's kind of a way of saying I don't take this subject lightly. I'm not suggesting it's easy, and I'm not suggesting that anyone is at fault for not properly receiving. This place, this I am not worthy place, is a very deep place, and it could come from very deep pain, maybe from early conditioning, maybe from trauma, from who knows where. It can involve deep work, and sometimes we need help. The guidance of a teacher is very important, maybe other help as well. So we need to approach this with great support and great kindness toward ourselves. So number 2, how do we practice receiving? Well, ironically, we begin to practice receiving by practicing giving in the conventional sense, because they are the same thing. Engage in all of those rituals, give of yourself with no thought of what you might get in return. Honor the Buddhas and ancestors. And I know that giving leads to receiving because I see how much more at ease we can become with ourselves doing this practice. The first few days of Rohatsu are so hard because we give so much, and then something happens, and maybe, at least for a little while, we can proceed with great ease because we've been giving so much. So you can vow to do the practice, you can vow to do things that support the practice, such as engaging in a healthy lifestyle, give up needless distractions, maybe put down your phone, all of those things. And the third one, you can actively practice receiving. Only do this if you're doing the giving part too. Step one of actively practicing receiving is to clearly see your impediments to receiving. See when you are separating yourself from the universe, and see when you're saying that the universe is worthy except for me. So my wife, Kathy, who came up with the theme for this talk, has been reading this book. It's called, it's a Japanese novel. It's called Tales from the Cafe. And it's a sequel to Before the Coffee Gets Cold. I think it's a pretty popular book. It's by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. And it's a story about how people go to this certain cafe and they can go back in time there. If they sit at the right place and do the right thing, they can go back in time. And the rule is they can't change anything in the present by going back in time. Cannot change anything at all. But they can talk to people in the past. And people do that. And they tend to go on these healing journeys. And imagine if you could go back in time and talk to somebody, maybe somebody you lost years ago, and talk to them about what they still mean to you. Or go back and talk to somebody that you had kind of a hard time with and work those things out. This could be a real healing journey. So I'd like to read just a little bit about a page from this. So there is a man named Kiyoshi, and his wife died about 30 years ago. And he's at the cafe and he's asking some questions. He says, this is him narrating, "I was very curious. I wondered why there were 4 people who, despite knowing the rule that you cannot change the present no matter how hard you try, were able to go and meet people who had died." Kiyoshi turned the page of his notebook. "There was one woman who went back to meet her younger sister who had died in a road accident. Her name was Yeko Hirai. I assume you know her, right?" Only Nagari replied, "Yeah." So now this is the narrative voice talking. "Hirai's family ran an old traveler's inn in Sendai, and as the eldest child, she had been meant to take over. But she didn't want to, and when she was 18, she left to make her own life. Her parents disinherited her. Only her sister stayed in contact. Year after year, she had visited Hirai, trying to persuade her to return home. Then, tragically, she had died in a road accident on the way home from one such visit. Hirai traveled to the past to meet her sister." And then this is Kiyoshi talking again. "After visiting her sister in the past, she immediately returned to the inn and took it over. I wanted to hear her side of the story, so I went to Sendai. 7 years had passed. Hirai was now thriving as the manager of the inn. I asked her, 'Why did you go and meet your dead sister, even though you knew that the present would not change?' She laughed at my rude and nosy question, and then she said this: 'If I had led a sad life as a result of my sister's death, then it would have been as if her death had caused it. So I thought I mustn't allow that to happen. I swore to myself that I would make sure that I was happy. My joy would be the legacy of my sister's life.'" And then here's Kiyoshi speaking again. "On hearing this, it occurred to me what I had been missing. I had always thought that because my wife had died, I on my own should never be happy." So, you see what happens here. Kiyoshi sees that there is this great self-imposed impediment to his own happiness. He realizes that he can't help anyone by imposing unhappiness on himself. It certainly is not a way to honor the wife he lost. The way to honor her is for him to accept happiness. So, yeah, and you don't have to travel back in time to learn this. You can learn this through introspection, meditation, through becoming familiar, very familiar with your impulses. And once you see you have these impulses, if you do have them, this may not apply to everyone, you can remind yourself, wow, like my grandma, who loved me unequivocally, wanted above all else for me to be happy. Could I tell her I'm happy? Could I say to her, yes, I'm happy? Can I honor her in that way? And when I bow to the altar, can I receive love from the Buddhas and ancestors? Can I honor them in that way? Can I thank them for holding me up? And because they're holding me up, can I stand up? Isn't that better for everyone? And a lot of this is about accepting your own potential. You know, as little kids, we tend to think our potential is unlimited. We can do anything. And then as we get older, little bits of faith in our own potential kind of get blocked. Some of this is reasonable. We realize, no, I never am going to be a Major League Baseball player. It's not going to happen. But some of it is not reasonable. Some of it is a jump to a wrong conclusion. A wrong conclusion. I will never be able to do this thing. Like when I used to think at one time, I will probably never do public speaking again because it makes me so panicky. This really happened. So this practice helps us to recognize our potential and our wrong views about our lack of potential. And I have seen the deepest transformations in people. And I've seen people coming to places they never thought they could come to. And I don't say this much to people individually, but I can say it to the collective. I see you and I believe in you, and you probably have no idea of what your great potential is. So please do not cut off faith in yourself. Do not do that to the rest of us. And that's my talk. Thank you. And I would love to hear from you. Katie.
Your talk made me think of a person that I had a somewhat difficult relationship with, who we were sort of friends, but one of the things that got in the way was that she could not receive well. Was that when I tried to give, she could not receive. And that really stood in the way of our relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know where that came from, but there's kind of a vulnerability in receiving, I think. You're afraid you're going to owe something and you're going to have to sort of maybe open yourself up emotionally. Yeah, thank you. Raymond.
Two comments. First, thank you for the talk. And just to piggyback on that, I noticed that at work in particular, it is very hard for people to take compliments. Anytime we give a compliment, there's, you're trained to, it wasn't me, it's a team, all that stuff. But people sincerely are not used to it, feel weird about us giving a compliment.
Yeah.
And just, we don't know how to receive. The other just reminds me of the giver, the receiver, and the gift.
Right.
All three have to exist or none at all. Well, different versions of it, sorry.
Right, that's part of our meal chant at retreats, giver, receiver, and gift. And giving and receiving, we have those moments in Oryoki where you're being served by the server and you're holding out your bowl, and it's really a beautiful exchange. And I think if you're really present, giver, receiver, and gift become one. Yes, that's beautiful. Yeah. Yes, Jamie.
Think, thinking about what Raymond just said, I think people consider giving and receiving very transactional. And they tend to forget or, not want to treat it any other way than that. And that's why it's so hard for somebody to receive a compliment, for example. Because they tend to think about it in transactional ways, like giving you this money and you've given me a service or a product, but it goes beyond that. I think that's why maybe.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Morning, Ted.
Tanya, good morning.
Okay, so two things. One, I was listening to a podcast with wisdom shared for the past year or something, and one of them was really simple but directly related to this, which is when someone says thank you, say you're welcome. And I chuckled because we know that just doesn't happen a whole lot, right? But the second thing is a question. This is actually one I think I've been holding for a really long time. You mentioned when you're talking about desire and giving up needs. I did not hear you say the word want. And one of the questions I've had for a really long time is, in Buddhism, is there actually a difference between needs and wants?
Well, we could probably, this isn't Buddhism, this is just me thinking, responding. I suppose we could distinguish between needs and wants. Wants are things we don't have to survive, but things we'd like to have. Needs are things that are absolutely essential, food, clothing, shelter, love, things like that. And it could be an important distinction because we don't want to try to convey that, well, we must give up all desires for everything and just not need anything. Of course, we need the basics. That's very important, that we really take care of our lives. We don't want to get off into this thing, well, we don't even need to take care of ourselves because it shouldn't be about our ego. So I don't know, maybe we could make that distinction. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it seems like it's kind of starting to live by the middle way of
Yeah.
being able to understand the difference between the two, and yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can explore this further at some point. Yes.
Sorry, excuse me. The distinction between needing and wanting seemed really, a really interesting question. Seemed really essential. It's like the first place that my mind went was like, there's something about control that's there with wanting, but not with needing. So like, I need shoes so that I won't slip and fall down, so that my feet won't do so much heat that I get sick. But I want really nice shoes so that I can control the way I'm perceived, and change something about the way things are, or manipulate other people essentially into thinking I'm a certain type of person because I have cool shoes or whatever.
Right.
I don't know, that's the thing. But yeah, it seems to be something.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone online have a comment? Yes.
I know for myself, it was and still is a little bit, but I've tried to train myself to come out of this because I know it's not healthy. But I mean, I grew up, and I think a lot of women grow up as little girls that you're trained that we are catering to the needs of others, and so it's very hard. I know it was very hard for a long time for me to accept that I also deserved to accept something when somebody gave it to me compliment or thing. Because it's just not the way that I grew up being kind of programmed. And so, I just didn't feel worthy of that. It made me feel very, very uncomfortable. And I was thinking of your friend too, like, it just made me feel just internally so uncomfortable because I didn't feel like I deserved that. And so, but I, through evaluating my thinking and whether that was correct or incorrect, I realized like I need to kind of fight against that and talk myself down from that because it's not true. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Thank you. Yeah. Yes.
I've never had like a really full understanding of like the way that karma interacts with in daily life, and I wonder if there are implications to this talk in that through, right speech, right action, that you put positive karmic potential into the universe, and then somewhere elsewhere somebody is drawing from that central store of good energy. So there's a giving and a receiving there. If these things are completely unrelated, that's fine too, but I wonder if there are implications.
A giving and receiving of karma. Yeah, well, we could think of it that way, I think. Kind of a motivator that I can create good karma. Sometimes I use karma as a motivator, kind of like little Ted needs some encouragement. And if I act in ways that just, kind of conform with the, let me start over again. If I can receive from someone, if I can receive something from someone graciously without any reservation, that is going to create some karma. If I fail to receive and I sort of make them feel badly and say, no, don't give that to me and I can't accept it and I'm not worthy, I've created some bad karma there. That's going to, there'll be implications about that for me down the road and probably for them as well. But if I can just receive it graciously and acknowledge that I'm worthy of it and take joy in it, then that's going to have an effect down the road too, a very positive effect. So does that kind of fit what you're suggesting there? Yeah, that's good. That's good. Is there someone else? Yes.
Thank you, Ted. Yeah, you're talking to me, reminded me of a patient I once had in my therapy practice where he would always drink a cup of tea during our session. And I have this practice where at the end of the session, I stand up and then I open the door for them and then I receive the cup of tea and then I put it away and take care of it. And this went on for a while and I started to get this feeling like he was kind of uneasy whenever I received the cup. And it was like a little cringy for him. So I finally asked him about this and he said, yes, that's actually the hardest part of our whole session. So I have to give you my cup of tea because there's no place for me to put it away. I just have to give it to you. And we talked about that for a while and just naming that and allowing himself to hear that. I don't want to be rude, but he sort of saw kind of the silliness in that or something. And so for a while after that, he just continued to give me the cup of tea, but it almost became like a practice now for him. And it was really interesting. And then from there on, things really started to shift and move. And we had talked about how like receiving care could be the next thing in this growth intellectually, but to actually do this embodied thing was really profound. It really taught me how like we didn't actually have to think a lot about why he was that way or why it's hard or any of that stuff. We just had to actually name it and do it. And I think that's because, as you said in your talk, like this is actually a dharmic reality that we are empty and the entropy. And so yeah, that's just you're talking to think of that. And there's something about, yeah, like an embodied practice, I think that makes that more real than thinking and talking about.
Ah, thank you. Yeah, I think that really fits in with the part of my talk where I said you can practice receiving. The first step is seeing the impediments to receiving, like you were able to name it. And then, you know, kind of spending some time with it and holding it, you know, maybe, you know, thinking about it might help, but really just kind of holding that and asking, where does that come from? What is that? What is that? And kind of work on being there and doing it. Yeah. Okay, yes.
I really liked your talk. It made me think, you know, in the past I've struggled with accepting praise and compliments and gifts because maybe perhaps I felt that it was feeding the ego part of me
Right.
by accepting that praise or compliment. But especially this time of year, you know, the holiday season, it really reaffirms that feeling of, you know, to get a gift and to receive a gift well is such a gift to the gift giver. And I've had to, you know, wrestle with that, but I feel like it's difficult to parse sometimes. Oh no, I'm not feeding my ego. No, I'm really giving a gift back to this person by accepting and hearing that in this moment. So I really enjoyed your talk.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
I take off from where you were talking about the shoes, between needing a pair of shoes to keep your feet warm this time of the year and saying, well, why not put an extra $10 and get a pair of shoes that actually look good. And it reminded me of something I'd heard from Ram Dass, read about from Ram Dass, and he said, don't get hung up on that. Said, presenting yourself in a welcoming way is an individual thing, for one thing, and you don't need to dwell on it. And I'm paraphrasing. I'm not paraphrasing. I'm blowing it. It's kind of trying to return to what I've read. You know, I'm old. You know, so this is probably 40 years ago that I read this. But he helped me a lot during that period of time where it's like I like to present myself in a nice way, and it comforted me to say that's okay. That's actually showing that you care about yourself. You're not wanting to harm anyone else in doing so. You're just trying to say, I'm enjoying this. I want to have a nice pair of shoes. So I don't know if that makes any sense as far as what you were talking about, but it does kind of help keep the wants and needs in perspective for me. And
yes.
Thank you for your talk.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That makes sense. Thank you.
Benton has his hand up online.
Okay, so maybe we'll make, we have an online comment from Benton. Maybe we'll make that the last one. Benton.
Hi, Ted. Thanks for your talk. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
One thing I've noticed is that a lot of people are afraid to ask for help when they need something. And yet people often, when they help somebody, they feel really good about themselves when they've helped somebody else out. And so it's important to remember that if you need help, ask for it. You're providing an opportunity for somebody to help you and feel good about themselves.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, well, I think we'll stop there so we can hear some announcements from our Doan. Thank you so much, everyone, for your attention.